Hi everyone, I am back and today I am going to show you how to make two separate things to make one great thing. I'm going to show you how to make peanut butter and salted caramel flapjacks. So the very first thing we're going to make is the salted caramel. I use a recipe from Salted Caramel Dreams by Chloe Timms. There are loads of different ways of making caramel, but I find that this one is the one that has never failed for me, so I will always use this book. I think the most important thing that is different to other caramel recipes is this. This is liquid glucose. You find it in the baking aisle in the supermarket. It just stabilises the sugar because sugar has a really awful way of crystallizing, especially when it's touched, when it's heated. So this just calms it down a little bit and makes it behave itself. If you don't have this, try this recipe without, maybe add another tablespoonful of water. Other important things to remember when making caramel. Heavy bottom pan distributes the heat really nicely, which means that you get an even temperature for your sugar. In this pan, I've got 225 grams of caster sugar, 3 tablespoons of the liquid glucose, and 4 tablespoons of water. And then I've stirred it together before it's gone near the heat. Don't stir it on the heat. No, no, no. If you're tempted, just don't, okay? Good. On standby, I've got just a cup of water and a pastry brush. So what I'm going to do is, as I heat this gently, I'm going to gently heat up the sugar water mixture, and then I can go around the sides of it where the sugar's climbed up the wall of the pan and just water it down so that you don't get crystallizing sugar on the sides. You'll see. Weigh out 65 grams of salted butter. I'm being a bit lazy, I don't have salted butter. I've got unsalted butter because that is baker's choice. And so I've just sprinkled some extra salt on it. I've got 200 mils of double cream and 3/4 of a teaspoon, of sea salt. I use Maldon sea salt, not table salt, please. Other sea salt varieties are available. Really gently heat that cream up. We don't want it to be burnt because that would taste really bad. So I just basically get it to the point that I can see the steam coming off it, and then I turn the heat off and take it away. The reason that you're warming up your cream is so that when it gets put into the hot sugar, it doesn't have a massive shock. Because again, you're working with really, really hot sugars, so be really careful with this. I've already taken the cream off the heat because it's already steaming. So you can either cover this up, or I just give it a shake every now and again because we're gonna need to use it in a few minutes anyway. Your caramel is not doing very much at the moment. You can see there's some crystallized bits there. All I'm gonna do is just brush some extra water. Sorry, this is really not the easiest thing to do. But do not stir. Even when you can see it looking like this, I am telling you now, do not be tempted to stir. What you can do instead is you could give it a little bit of a zhuzh, or you can gently tip that pan, and then bring it back. And as you can see, we're seeing the colour slowly change. Keep going. And what will start to happen is, as it gets darker, the bubbling slows down slightly, so it becomes more syrupy. You can make this caramel as dark as you like. Just be aware that the darker it gets, the more bitter the taste. So I like to go until this is sort of a golden syrup type colour. We're nearly there. When this is ready, you have to move quite quickly. You're going to take it off the heat. You're going to pour in the warmed up cream and salt, and then before it's stopped, it's going to spit actually at that point, so maybe keep the kids away. And once the cream's in, before the bubbling has stopped, you then add your butter, which is why I recommend having it ready to go and already in cubes. Once it's at this point, it darkens really quickly, so just be patient and keep focused. Okay, so cream's in, yes. You can't see, that's absolutely fine. And then I'm just gonna, big old handfuls of that softened butter, scrape that in. This makes quite a lot of caramel. You will not need all of this for the flapjack. So if I only want to make it for the flapjack, I will do half the quantities that I have stated in the beginning of this video. However, it is an incredibly handy thing to keep in the fridge. I always like to have a little bit in the fridge. I call it my depression caramel. So handy if you want to put dollops of it into cakes. Banana bread is a really good example of that. Or in porridge, or just in your face when you've had a bad day. So there you have your delicious salted caramel. Just keep it out of the way for the moment to cool down, and then it will be ready by the time we get to decorate our flapjack. First things first, for your flapjack, you want to preheat your oven. I've got a fan oven, so it's 170 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure of the equivalent of not a fan oven, I do apologise. And take a 20 centimetre square tin and just line it with greaseproof paper. You can do it really neatly. I just push in greaseproof paper and then fold in the corners. It's the same effect, just doesn't look as pretty. I am aware that a lot of my recipes so far have started with melting butter. That's not intentional. I just love butter. 175 grams of unsalted butter, and you just want to melt that. And then in a bowl, you can measure out equal quantities, 175 grams of soft brown sugar and 175 grams of golden syrup. They can go into the same bowl. They're going to be put in at the same time, so it's fine, it saves on washing up. So just melt that butter down, and then we're going to add our sugars a little bit at a time. Flapjack is one of the easiest things to make, and it is so good to do with kids, but you do have to be quite careful because it's obviously on the stovetop. So the butter's melted now, it's actually bubbling, so I'm going to turn the heat down slightly, don't take it off the heat, and just add your sugars in, maybe in two lots, and then give it a stir. You can stir this, I'll let you stir. And all we're doing with this is we're sort of making a kind of caramel again, but we're just letting the sugar dissolve into that butter. So it will look slightly strange to start with. It will look like the butter's sitting on top of all that sugar, but it will break down, I promise. And then the second bit of the sugar. You don't have to stir it constantly. I'm gonna just leave that for a minute, let it bubble. And I'm gonna get out my peanut butter. I'm not sure whether I've got enough. I did have a little bit of a panic about the peanut butter. You only need a tablespoon, by the way. You don't need all of this. Not just for toast, for flapjack. It will be looking like this. Do not panic. What I want you to wait for is for this all to start bubbling up, and then the butter actually incorporates into the sugar, and then you know that the sugar has properly dissolved. It's happening. Once it started bubbling like that, I want you to let it bubble away. You can keep stirring, that's fine. Let it bubble. Just let that bubble by itself for about 30 seconds, and then we're ready for the peanut butter. Now we're going to add a tablespoonful of our peanut butter. Yummy! So let it drop in, and that will... sorry, I can't help it. That will melt into our caramel. So you can take it off the heat. And when that has all blended in, you've got this lovely sort of, quite similar in colour to the salted caramel you've just made. And then what you need to add in is 340 grams of porridge oats. So this recipe is absolutely great if you can't have dairy because you just use dairy-free butter. If you are gluten intolerant, because you just make sure that you're buying oats that are definitely gluten-free. Vegan, there's no eggs, and again, you can substitute the butter for a dairy-free alternative. If you don't want to use peanut butter, if you've got a nut allergy, sometimes I put Biscoff spread in. You could put a mashed banana in it. If you don't want to put anything in and just have plain flapjack, the quantities are exactly the same. You just leave out the scoop of peanut butter and you're going to have a lovely flapjack. Make sure those oats are all mixed in. You don't want any that aren't coated in that delicious caramel. All we're going to do is just plonk it in the pan, put it in the oven. Push that out to the corners. Could also add fruit to this, raisins, sultanas. I wouldn't advise adding chocolate chips because they're just going to melt immediately. It's not like a cake. This is going to go into the oven for 20 to 25 minutes. It really does depend on your oven. When you take them out, you want to have a little bit of a wobble to them. Remember that this is mostly sort of a caramelly mixture. So sugar dissolves, butter melts. And so if you wait for them to be really firm, it means everything's burnt and you're going to break a tooth. So check them after 20 or 25 minutes. So mine was really quick today. I think as well adding the peanut butter, it's got just a slightly higher fat content, so it does cook a lot quicker than if you didn't add the peanut butter. This is what we're looking for. It will be bubbling at the edges, but it will be quite a bit darker than when we first put it in. And as you can see, it's still moving quite a lot. So we want to leave it in the tin to cool down, preferably completely cool. So you want to leave that for at least an hour, I would say, and then come back to it. The flapjack is now completely cool. I've put a little bit of the salted caramel into a piping bag. If you want to, you could just use a spoon. I've also put it in a Tupperware. This is my caramel for the fridge. If you just want to use a spoon and just go like that over your flapjack, that's absolutely fine. I am going to do a messy little piping job. So all I do with this, I am folding it up for you to see, is just nice little, you put on as much or as little as you want to. Again, you don't have to use salted caramel. You could just use melted chocolate or nothing. Keep it plain. If you don't want to make your own caramel, you could buy the carnation stuff, the condensed milk, the caramel version. That would probably work just as well. So there you have it. These will be ready to then chop into individual slices. Or get a load of that caramel drip. There you have it. Peanut butter and salted caramel flapjack.